Hello, everybody. Jim here, welcoming you back to another one of these conversational type videos. I haven't done one in a while, so I thought this would be an opportune time to kind of just sit down and rap a little bit with the audience. Just sit and talk and enjoy some beer, which I have some Asahi Super Dry in front of me tonight. And it is a fairly warm and muggy night here in Tokyo. It's August, and it's been a pretty warm summer so far, and very humid. That's no secret to anybody. So, yeah, definitely anybody planning to come to visit Tokyo next year for the Olympics, keep in mind, summertime, hot, humid. Be ready for that. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about tonight was, and I'm kind of late to the party, but there was a series of video responses being made by various YouTubers. There was, I believe there was Smash JT, Radical Reggie, I think Billy from the Game Chasers as well, and probably like a handful of other people. I know I saw quite a lot of them pop up, but it was the point of collecting retro games, and when is it time to like sell your games and things like that. And I mean, fair enough question. That's something I've been dealing with recently too, as I've been a game collector for a long time, but now I've also sort of gotten in to the game of selling games as well. The game of selling games, that's what it is. But I've started doing that too, and a lot of stuff I've been selling are things I pick up on my game hunting trips to Book Off and Heart Off, and because I can find stuff relatively cheap here, I am able to sell it for prices that are lower, at least, than like eBay and Amazon and Yahoo Auctions and all that, but at least have like a little bit of a markup for myself so that I can, you know, buy more, sell more, etc., etc. But I've also sold some stuff out of my own personal collection because, you know, the price was such that I said to myself, you know what, I can part with this. I'd rather have the money than the game, and really if I want to at some later point, I can just buy the game again if finances are as such. But as far as the point of collecting video games, that's a question with no real answer, to me anyway, because there's no objective point to doing it. There's the end goal is whatever the hell you decide it is. There's no, I don't think it's not like a competition. Some people make a competition out of it, sure, but I mean, I think unless you're legitimately going for like Guinness World Record, biggest game collection or something, the point is whatever you have made up in your mind. So I wanted to talk about that because the point of game collecting for me has changed from time to time. And I don't have in-depth notes or anything, but I have kind of come up with what I think are like 4 different kinds of collectors, and they collect for different reasons, and so for them the point of collecting is going to be different. So if you lose that desire, then there is no point. Sell your games. But it's as simple as, if you want it and you can afford it, buy it. If you don't want it, don't buy it. Or if you're tired of having it, sell it. I mean, these are just decisions that you make. But the point, so here we go. 4 different types of collectors, at least as far as I can tell. And like I said, I've been in different categories at different times. Sometimes you're just a cross-section of a number of categories. But I think the first type is just the die-hard collector. And what I mean by that is the kind of person who, they collect games, but it's very, I guess it's very planned. It's very well thought out. They want these specific games, and they want it in this, this pristine condition, or they want a complete set of this, or what have you. They have a very like their collecting is goal oriented, and it's really for no other reason than to just be able to say, I have that. Like the collecting games just for like they say in baseball, for love of the game, which I think is why a lot of people collect video games. They just really love video games. I can say that for me, that becoming an adult, like when I was a kid, we didn't have very much money in our household, so like any other kid, I wanted like every video game in the world. But realistically, you got a new game on your birthday and Christmas, and that was about it. And then you could rent games from time to time. But at that time as a kid, if you would have asked me how many video games I wanted, I would have said like thousands, you know. And then when I reached adulthood and had expendable income, and I could just buy, I mean, within like certain boundaries, within reason, I could buy really however many video games I wanted. And being someone that has loved video games his entire life, I was like, you know, I always wanted this, I always wanted that, I'm gonna buy, you know, and some of the stuff didn't make any sense. It was just stuff I always wanted but never played, but just loved the advertisements and really was a kid and was just a sucker for advertising. I just believed everything. So I was like, oh, I really want a 3DO. Oh, I remember how awesome that thing looked. And so I'd buy a 3DO and 21 games with it, and then like almost all of them sucked except for like a couple, and I'd be like, man, I really want this. I never had a 32X as a kid. I never had a Sega CD. I never had anything Sega. I want all the Sega stuff. Now, you know, get all that. And so when you that's kind of like your mentality, is you just absolutely love video games. You're just a diehard fan of video games. You want to have all of the games, and you love the box art, and you can just sit there and pick games off the shelf and just sort of appreciate the art and flip through the manuals and then play them for a little while. And really the joy for you is just having the game, just looking over at a wall of games and just being happy with what you have. I mean, typically when I think of someone who's like a diehard game collector, unless they're going for like complete sets or something, they have some kind of elaborate goal, most of the stuff they're going to have in their collection is stuff that they've like always wanted, or things they just like. Neo Geo collectors are like a good example of this. People who are just, they love Neo Geo, they love SNK so much, and they buy all of the AES games regardless of how expensive they are, just so they can have that game in their hands. And they're gonna play the game, but they love the box art, they love the manual art, everything, and they just love, like, they'll just share pictures of like, here's my AES collection, and it's all these, you know, boxes, all these different cartridges and all these things, or the Neo Geo CD stuff, or they have MVS carts and all these things. They just love SNK. They're diehard Neo Geo fans, so they collect because they just love Neo Geo, and that probably will always be the case. They'll probably always love Neo Geo, and unless they have like unlimited money, there's probably always going to be like some game that eludes them or something. But that's what I consider like a die-hard game collector, is somebody that collects because they really love games, and the joy for them is just being able to look at that shelf and see, oh cool, I have this, and I can take it off and I can handle it and hold it in my hands. Like, this is something I've wanted since I was like, I don't know, whatever, like 8 years old or something. It's, I don't know, kind of almost like maybe an emotional attachment to games or something that kind of like drives them. So for them, the entire point of collecting is just for the joy of it, just for the joy of having video games. It's kind of like people who collect anything else, baseball cards or comic books or something, when they do it for a passion, just because they grew up reading Spider-Man and now they just collect all the Spider-Man comics because that's what they love. They love Spider-Man. It's the same thing for wide swaths of game collectors, and I would say mostly I consider myself falling into this category, are people who just really love video games, and they've always loved video games, and it's just something that's always going to be a part of their life, and that's why they collect those games. Kind of on the flip side of that, there's what I think of as like the obsessive compulsive collector. And I mean, these are people, they love video games too, but they just like, and I've been on this side of it too, like however many years ago, I used to pretty much every weekend go to like 3 or 4 different hard-offs that were all located within driving distance of my house. And I would go and just like buy like ridiculous amounts of games, because I would go to the junk bins and everywhere, and I would just buy games because they were 100 yen a piece. Or I would, just buying tons of PS2 games and PS1 and Famicom. I was like buying up like everything, like leaving every weekend with bags full of games. Not necessarily any games that I really anticipated playing very much. Some of them I had a good idea that I wouldn't even like. Like I was buying like old like baseball and football games on the Famicom and everything, which I don't care for. Like there was no, like with all those games in my possession, I was never gonna play some of those like crappier games, and it was just like an obsessive thing. It was like a routine, like this constant routine of like, okay, get up, go hit all the shops, buy games, come home, make pickup video, and wash, rinse, repeat. And I think that there are collectors that have that kind of mentality. And what's kind of dangerous about that one is where the person who you can describe as like a die-hard collector, their collecting is typically goal-oriented, and they have a good idea of what they can afford, and usually they're looking for specifics. So I've budgeted this much money to pay for like this game or this set of games or something like that. Usually the person who is like really obsessive, they're also usually people who are not very like financially responsible, and this was also kind of true of myself at the time when I was kind of in my early mid-20s, not the most financially responsible person. So instead of buying all those video games, I could have been like tucking a little money away. But usually people who obsessively collect games, they just every weekend they're like, well, I was at the thrift shop and I bought this, and this, so I went here, I ordered this many games online, and they're just buying, not with the idea of having a complete set of this or whatever. They're just, it's kind of willy-nilly. There's no real direction to it. They're just buying whatever comes in front of them, and there's not really a whole lot of regard for like finances. And so this person will end up with a whole like shit ton of video games and then like no money, but that won't stop them from scrounging up as much as they can to go just buy more video games. It's almost like hoarding. Like, I guess that's a good way to say it. The people who obsessively collect games, it's almost kind of like the die-hard gamer, but without any kind of sense of, like, responsibility or, like, what's a good word? Restraint. Like a die-hard game collector, but with no restraint. Just whatever it is, buy it, because it's a video game, and because the collection has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I need to keep all these games. Why? I don't know. So, obsessive, compulsive kind of collectors, the hoarders of video games, if you will, are kind of, I guess that you could say is like pointless collecting, because it's buying just out of habit, I guess. And again, I've been there in my life. I've bought games just out of habit. Just, okay, it's Saturday or whatever, I'm gonna go drive to the hard off shops and I'm gonna go dig through the bargain bins or whatever. I'm probably gonna walk out of there with like 20 or 30 games. Why? Like, I would go home and like clean them up and like test them and maybe play each one for like 15 minutes. And if it was like a good game, I would play for a little longer. But most of them I would just play and be like, man, it's okay, and then put it away, So there's the obsessive collector, and maybe one day that person kind of wakes up and looks at all the stuff they have and looks at their bank account and goes, wow, what the hell have I been doing? Maybe they don't have quite that that love, like that goal-oriented love of game collecting that the die-hard collector does. It's just sort of like a tick, like a mental thing they have. And maybe one day that tick goes away, and they go, what the hell do I do? Then that's probably a good time to sell your games. Because if you don't really like love your games, then what the hell? Just sell them off. If it's just a thing, just an object, you really have no emotional attachment to it. Bye-bye, sweet Fanny Adams. Goodbye. And that brings me to the next kind of game collector, which I like to refer to as the investor. What is the investor doing? Well, it's in the name. The investor buys games that they think will appreciate in value, or maybe if I complete a collection, then I can auction it or something. The investor has a purely financial interest in collecting, so their game collection will look similar to the collection of like a die-hard collector, but it's because, okay, now that I have all of these games, I paid, they're kind of meticulous with their finances. So they will look at what they paid at the time they bought it, and then they'll look at it appreciate in value, and they'll kind of coordinate when is the best time to sell, and that's when they go and seek out those die-hard game collectors who they know are going to have the money on hand because they've been like waiting for this game to pop up on eBay or pop up in a Facebook group or something. So they're kind of counting on that die-hard collector or the obsessive collector as well, if the obsessive person has that kind of money. But the investor they're almost like what am I searching for, like the stockbroker of game collectors. So I have these games. I spotted this at the shop today. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy all the games in this series. I'm gonna sit on them for a little while, and then I'm gonna sell them off. It's not really like a scalper. There are scalpers out there, and I don't consider a scalper like a type of collector. A scalper is like a purely like opportunistic person. Like they have that short-term profit goal of I'm gonna buy these right now and then sell them like tomorrow when they're gonna be sold out. The investor is like, I'm going to buy these right now. 3 or 4 years from now, I'm going to sell them for like 3 times what I paid. I'm going to find somebody with deep pockets who is obsessed with collecting this series or for this system, and I'm going to sell these babies off. So the investor, it's almost like gambling, because stock market stuff is kind of like gambling too. So you buy these games with the idea that they're going to appreciate in value. How do you determine that? Well, if you keep track of what games go for, so if you can see that, okay, a year ago this game cost $20 and now it costs like 40 or 50, you can make a pretty safe bet that maybe that trend is going to continue to go up. So it's going to become more expensive. And this has happened with me when I first came to Japan. There were certain games that I bought just because I really wanted them. Games in like the Castlevania series or some shoot 'em ups on the Mega Drive or PC Engine or whatever. And at the time I bought them, I was like, man, this is kind of expensive. This is like $60, but I really want this. And now I look and these games are going for like hundreds of dollars, sometimes $500-600. So even though I didn't buy them with the intention of selling them later at a higher price, unbeknownst to me, that was an investment. And some people collect purely for that reason. They collect because at some point it's gonna pay off, baby. They don't necessarily dislike video games or anything, but love of the game is not really their primary goal. It's to basically sell it later. And then they're kind of like the short-term example of that, which are the resellers, kind of like the fourth version of this. And I know some of them here, and they're mostly cool guys and stuff, but the reseller isn't buying because this is an investment. The reseller is buying it now because I found it for this certain price now, and now I can sell it at a markup and make a little bit of money for myself. And now I've all these years of, I guess, in my mind, thinking of resellers as being sort of in the same vein as scalpers. Now knowing people who resell and then doing some reselling myself, that's not necessarily the case. It's really just kind of business, I guess. I'm using air quotes. You can't see me doing the air quotes, but I had no understanding of business or buying and selling or anything until I just started recently doing it. And again, I don't know what everybody else's is. Obviously, some of the people I see on eBay, their business model is sell this shit for an insane amount of money and then just hope some sucker comes along and picks it up. And what I've been trying to do is look at what they're doing and not follow that trend, because certain games that I've had in my possession that I had the intention of selling, I'm like, okay, let me go look at the listings everywhere else and see what these things are going for. Go have a look on eBay, for example, and I see this game just going for these, exorbitant amounts of money, but there are multiple copies of it, and they're all priced in that same price range, and they're all just sitting there. And they've been sitting there, and they're not selling. Why? Because it's an insane amount of money. People would like to play that game, or they would like to own it, but they're not going to give you like $1,000 or something like that. So with that in mind, I'm like, well, that's obviously crazy. Let's sell for less than that. I'll sell it for more than I I paid for it myself, obviously, because the point of buying and selling is to make a profit, and you make a profit so that you can buy more stock, and you buy more stock, you can sell more stock, and then it just keeps going and going and going. So more people end up with games, and you end up with some money, and everybody wins. But in this case, it's like I bought this game, I listed it for something that no one will ever want to pay for it, and now I don't have any money, nobody has a game, nobody's winning. So sort of like my general strategy is, okay, sell for less than that. Make some profit for myself, but don't be a greedy prick. And if you do that, you'll get a good reputation, people will come to see that you have fair prices, and you deal with people fairly, and you're not trying to fuck them like somebody, going crazy on eBay or some scalper or something who, like the kinds of people that ran out and bought like a dozen Nintendo Classics when they first came out and then started listing them for like $300 or something. Those pricks, we all know those people. They're jerks. They're not collectors at all. They're just opportunists. They're vultures. The reseller, on the other hand, the reseller is a collector himself, as I am. I have a considerable game collection, but the reseller also says, you know what, I can buy this and pass it on to somebody else. And I can kind of do this repeatedly, and it's not gonna like make, no one's gonna, well, I'm not gonna say nobody, because I know people that make a living off of doing this. It's all they do. Like their entire livelihood is going to book offs and hard offs and other various game shops and buying games that people really want, and then facilitating that. They go to the shop, they buy up the games, they mark them up, a little bit, like nothing crazy, like 25-30% or something, versus the like 200% you typically see online, and then they sell that. And if you do that enough times, you make a nice little profit for yourself. So there are some people out here making a nice decent living doing that. I myself am just sort of facilitating. People have been asking for like certain things, and I'm like, sure, I'll hook you up with that. Or I post some stuff on my Facebook page, just stuff that I have that I think people might be interested in. And so far, so good. But the reseller is a collector, but they're also a facilitator for other collectors. And that's now my whole, and you could say maybe it's kind of like, oh, now that you're doing it, like now it's okay or something. But I guess at the time, I kind of construed resellers and scalpers together, not realizing that anybody who buys a game and then sells it later is a reseller. So, but that's, I think the difference between the investor and the reseller is the investor thinks that, I'm going to get this now, hang on to it, let it appreciate in value, and then sell it. Whereas the reseller says, I'm going to buy this now, and somebody's going to want it, and then I'm going to sell it to them. So it's kind of like a quick, like, I bought it, I sold it, games and money are constantly changing hands. Whereas the investor is like sitting on a nest egg. They're like, all right, I've got this complete collection of these things. Let's wait a few years. Okay, now let me post it on eBay, or let me, do something to try to, get all this money in one lump sum. So the investor, the reseller, two different kinds of people. And I think I've rambled on long enough, but those are the people I think of when I think of game collectors. I think of people that are just like the die-hard game collectors who just love games and gaming and are really emotionally attached to their game collections, and something about it evokes kind of like a kid-like feeling in them. There's the obsessive people who just collect obsessively because they don't know what else to do with their time, or maybe it's even a mental, I don't know how to describe it, a tick, an obsession. But the die-hard person is more responsible with their collecting versus the obsessive person who kind of just hoards everything with no real clear goal in mind, the investor and the reseller. And for each of those people, there's a different point to their game collecting. And if you are one of those people, but then you wake up one day and you don't feel that way anymore, you feel like there's no point to collecting those games, then go ahead and sell them. I mean, why not? That someone out there is going to either be that die-hard gamer, or somebody's going to really want it, and maybe they want it for themselves, or maybe it's something they share with somebody else. Maybe they are their kids or something like that. I know now a lot of people our age, they have kids and they share their retro gaming passion with their kids and stuff. So if you wake up one day and you find that you don't have the passion for collecting games anymore, and that point that you once had, which whatever your goal was, if you don't have it anymore and you really don't care, then, I mean, honestly, there are so many video games and there are so many ways to play them. that honestly, as long as you live in like a first world country, like if you have like an internet connection and some expendable income, you'll never have to be without video games ever for the rest of your life. And video games are, I mean, they're awesome games coming out all the time, and they're everywhere, and they're not all, you know, crazy expensive. So if you wake up and you're like, wow, what was the point of this? Like, if you even have to ask, I mean, maybe you're experiencing some kind of buyer's remorse, or maybe you just don't have the passion anymore, and just say to hell with it. Sell them, or sell some of them, and just see, like, start with a little, you know, just take a few games, sell them off, go find some people, but maybe go to like some of the Facebook groups or something like that. I like that because those are people, because there are groups that it's like a dedicated Sega group, a dedicated PC Engine group, or a Neo Geo group. Like, these are people that I would think of as like the die-hard collectors. These are the people that they're huge Neo Geo fans. So if you've got some Neo Geo games in your collection that for whatever reason you just don't care anymore, go to those people that really, they have this fandom for it and they love it, and just make somebody's day. Sell them a game and don't rip them off. You know, don't go look at, well, this is what it sells for on eBay right now. Look, it's $1 million. So obviously that's what everybody's paying for it. No, not really. It's $1 million. There are 6 copies listed for $1 million. Nobody's going to pay that. You might want to come down a little bit. But as for, yeah, what is the point of collecting? There is no point. There's no objective point. It's all subjective. It's whatever the hell you say it is. If you say it's this, that, or the other thing, then by golly, that's what it is. And I have not taken a sip off my beer for far too long, and I feel like I've talked for far too long. But down in the comments, I would love to hear everybody's thoughts on this, and let me know, like, realistically, are you a die-hard collector? Are you the obsessive type? Are you an investor? Are you a reseller? Let me know. Or are you the type of person that's come to that crossroads where you've looked at your games and have just said, what was the point of this? I don't give a shit about this anymore, and have you considered just selling it all off? Sweet Fanny Adams, as they say. Bye-bye. I'd like to know, so let me know. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, liking, subscribing, etc., etc. Just steadily, I've seen that as I publish content, the channel keeps growing, and I appreciate that. I personally, objectively, don't think that I have like the greatest channel on YouTube. I wouldn't, not even, like, that's underplaying it a bit. I think my YouTube channel here is, I don't know. There are just plenty of other like better produced things that people could be watching, but sometimes people choose to watch my stuff, and that's greatly appreciated. So again, thank you everybody for listening, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.